ferry is called the Delmont. That's not a name anyone chose. It was already painted on the transom when the parish bought her in 1987, and nobody in the transportation office ever saw fit to change it. She's 71 feet, steel hull, diesel electric, and she runs the Bayou La Fourche crossing between Edgard and Reserve 6 days a week. Sundays, she's down for maintenance. I've been her captain for 11 years. I want to say that clearly because I need you to understand the kind of thing I'm talking about. This is not a ghost ship. This is not an abandoned vessel I found drifting somewhere. The Delmont is parish property. She has a DOT registration number. She has a Coast Guard inspection certificate taped inside the wheelhouse that expires next March. I take her out of the dock at 6:15 every morning, and I run the crossing every 40 minutes until the last scheduled departure at 10:40 p.m. Then I shut her down, lock the wheelhouse, and go home. That's the daytime job. That's the job I was hired for. The other job started about 14 months ago, and I did not apply for it. I should tell you about the crew first, because they matter to this more than I want them to. My full-time deckhand is Cedric, who's 58 and has been on the water his whole life. He handles the vehicle ramp, the tie-offs, and the passenger counts. Then there's Maren, who's 23 and who the parish hired last year as part of some workforce training pipeline. She's my trainee. She's supposed to be learning the wheelhouse. She's supposed to be getting her operator's certification by August so she can eventually take over a crossing somewhere else in the parish. Cedric knows. I'll get to how. Maren does not know, and keeping it that way has become the thing I think about most. 14 months ago, I closed out a Tuesday night shift. Normal evening. 4 cars on the last crossing, a couple of pedestrians, one guy on a bicycle who rides over to Reserve 3 nights a week to see his girlfriend. I logged the departure, ran the crossing, docked on the Edgard side, let Cedric finish the tie-off, shut down the engines, and locked the wheelhouse. We walked to our cars. I drove home. I ate leftover rice and gravy. I went to bed. At 1:40 a.m., my phone rang. It was the parish transportation dispatch number, which I didn't even know was staffed at that hour. A woman's voice I didn't recognize told me there'd been a scheduling error, and I needed to return to the dock to run an unscheduled crossing. I said no. I said I'd been off the clock for 3 hours. She said the crossing had already been authorized and that passengers were waiting on the reserve side. I want to explain something about how I reacted because it matters. I didn't think it was strange. I was irritated. I thought some parish administrator had approved a late crossing for a construction crew or a utility company and forgotten to put it on the schedule. That kind of thing has happened before, not at 1:40 in the morning, but the bureaucratic flavor of it was familiar enough that my annoyance overrode my confusion. I got dressed. I drove back. When I got to the Edgard dock, the Delmont was running. Her engines were on. Her navigation lights were lit. The wheelhouse floods were dark, but the deck lights were on, the ones we use when passengers are boarding. The vehicle ramp was down on the reserve side. I could see it from across the water. I called Cedric. He answered on the 6th ring, half asleep. He had not gone back to the dock. He had not started the engines. I told him what I was looking at, and there was a silence on the line that lasted long enough for me to hear his wife ask who was calling. He said He'd be there in 20 minutes. He told me not to board until he arrived. I didn't listen to him. I walked down the dock and I stepped onto the Delmond because she is my vessel and she was running without authorization. I went up to the wheelhouse. The door was unlocked. The helm controls were in neutral. The engine gauges were nominal. The radio was off. Everything was exactly as it should be if someone had started the pre-departure sequence and then walked away before engaging the drive. I looked down at the vehicle deck. It was empty. I looked across the water to the reserve side. The ramp was still down, and there were people standing on the landing. I could see them under the dock lights, maybe 15, 20 of them, standing in a loose cluster the way passengers do when they're waiting to board. Not in a line, not organized, just people standing near the ramp, some of them closer to the water than others, the way you'd see at any ferry landing in the world. I picked up the PA handset, which is what I do when I need to make an announcement to passengers on the dock. I pressed the button and I said, "This is the captain. The ferry is not currently in service. Please clear the landing area." None of them moved. I don't mean they ignored me. I mean the announcement didn't reach them. I could hear my own voice through the external speaker. It was working. But the people on the reserve side continued standing the way they'd been standing, as if the sound had passed through them or around them, as if we were in different rooms. Cedric arrived. He came up to the wheelhouse. He looked at the reserve landing for a long time. He asked me how many I counted. I said 15, maybe 20. He said he counted 43. We were looking at the same dock. That was the first night. Over the next 2 weeks, it happened 3 more times. The dispatch call, the engines already running, the passengers on the far side, always after midnight, always on the reserve landing. The dispatch number, when I tried calling it back during the day, rang through to the normal parish office, and no one there had any record of late-night calls. The 4th time, Cedric and I ran the crossing. I need to be precise about why. It was not courage. It was not curiosity. It was because, on that 4th night, the Delmond's drive engaged on its own. I was in the wheelhouse. Cedric was on the vehicle deck. The throttle moved forward without my hand on it, and the ferry began to pull away from the Edgard dock. Cedric shouted up to me. I grabbed the throttle and pulled it back to neutral. It resisted. Not mechanically. It resisted the way a dog resists a leash, with a living, directional pull. It wanted to go to reserve. It wanted to pick them up. I let it. I need you to understand that I let it, because the alternative was fighting my own vessel in the middle of a river at 2 in the morning. And because a 71-foot ferry moving under power without a cooperating helmsman is a danger to every boat, dock, and structure on the waterway. I let it because controlling the crossing was safer than preventing it. We docked on the reserve side. Cedric lowered the ramp because that is his job, and because whatever was happening, the operational sequence was the only structure we had. The ramp went down. The passengers walked on. They looked like people. I need to say that clearly. There were men and women, different ages, different builds. They were dressed in ordinary clothes, not from any specific era, not in white gowns or period costume or anything that would tell you what they were. Some of them carried bags. One woman had a small cooler, the soft kind you'd take to a child's baseball game. A man near the back of the group was wearing a reflective safety vest the kind you'd see on a road crew. They didn't look at Cedric. They didn't look up at the wheelhouse. They walked onto the vehicle deck and they stood in the places where passengers stand, along the side rails, near the benches, a few of them at the forward rail looking out over the water. They didn't speak to each other. Cedric called up to me on the intercom. His voice was steady, but I have known this man for 9 years, and I could hear the steadiness costing him something. He said, "I count 43. I looked down at the deck. I counted 19. I ran the crossing. 7 minutes, same as daylight. The Delmont handled normally. The current was the same. The channel markers were in the right positions. Everything was exactly as it should be, except that I was carrying passengers I hadn't boarded, on a crossing I hadn't scheduled, and the man beside me on the deck, and I could not agree on how many of them there were." We docked on the Edgard side. Cedric raised the ramp. The passengers walked off onto the Edgard landing and up toward the road. I watched them from the wheelhouse. They moved up the gravel path in ones and twos, the way real passengers disperse. Some turn left, some turn right. One man, the one in the safety vest, stopped on the road and looked both ways before crossing, the way you do when you're being careful. Then they were gone. Not vanished, just gone up the road and into the dark the way anyone would be at 2 in the morning in Edgard, Louisiana. Cedric and I shut down the engines. We locked the wheelhouse. We stood in the parking lot and we didn't talk about what had happened for several minutes. Then he said, "They were going somewhere." And I said yes. And he said, "They needed the ferry to get there." And I said yes. And that was the whole conversation. It has happened 31 times since then. Not every night, sometimes twice a week, sometimes nothing for 10 days. There's no pattern I've found that maps to weather, tide, moon phase, or calendar date. The dispatch call comes, or it doesn't. The engines start, or they don't. When they do, we go. Here is what I have learned. The passenger count is never the same between me and Cedric. He always counts more than I do. The gap has been as small as 6 and as large as 200. On one night in September, he counted over 300 people on the vehicle deck of a ferry that holds 40. He described them standing shoulder to shoulder, filling the deck, packed onto the ramp, some of them standing on the gunwales. I looked at the same deck and saw maybe 25 people with plenty of space between them, some of them leaning on the rail the way you do on a warm night. They never board on the Edgard side. They are always waiting on reserve. They always cross to Edgard. The Delmont always wants to go to reserve to collect them, never the other direction. They have never spoken, not to us, not to each other, but they make the small sounds people make. I have heard a cough. Cedric has heard a child laugh, though I have never seen a child among them. He has described children to me, entire families. I see only adults, usually alone. They do not interfere with the vessel. They do not come to the wheelhouse. They do not touch equipment. They stand where passengers stand. They ride the crossing, and they disembark. They are, in every functional respect, passengers. They are using the ferry for its intended purpose. That is the part that I find hardest. Now, I have to talk about Maren. Maren works the day shifts with me. And on nights when there's a late schedule crossing for an event or a holiday, she works those too. She has never been present for a midnight run. This is because I have I've made sure of it. When I know or suspect or feel, in the particular way I've learned to feel, that a night crossing is coming, I make certain she has gone home. I have adjusted her schedule. I have invented reasons to send her off early. I have, on one occasion, told her the parish had called a maintenance shutdown for the following morning so she wouldn't need to report until noon, because I knew the engines were going to start that night and I didn't want her anywhere near the dock. Cedric understands why. We have not discussed it explicitly, but he sees what I'm doing, and he supports it in the way he supports it, which is by never questioning the schedule changes and by never mentioning the midnight crossings during daytime hours when Maren is present. The reason I don't want her there is not that I think it's dangerous. In 31 crossings, nothing has harmed us. The passengers are not hostile. The Delmond runs safely. The crossing is the crossing. The reason I don't want her there is what Cedric told me after the 9th run. He was quiet for a while after we docked, which was not unusual. Then he said, "One of them looked at me tonight." He said it simply, the way he says most things. I asked what he meant. He said a woman near the port rail had turned and looked directly at him as she was disembarking, and he had recognized her. She was his mother's cousin, Elaine, who had died in 2014. He said she looked the way she'd looked when he was a child, before she got sick. I asked him what she did. He said she didn't do anything. She looked at him, and then she walked off the ferry. I asked if he was all right. He said he didn't know yet. Over the following months, Cedric recognized more of them. Not every crossing, but regularly enough that it became a feature of the runs, something he carried with him down from the vehicle deck each time like an object he couldn't put down. A former neighbor, a man he'd worked with on a tugboat in the 90s, a girl he'd gone to high school with who'd been killed in a car accident the year they graduated, his grandmother. I have never recognized anyone. The passengers I see are strangers, every one of them, every time. I asked Cedric once if they were all dead, the ones he recognized. He looked at me for a while and said, "Every single one." So now you understand why I can't let Maren be there. She's 23. Her mother died 2 years ago. Ovarian cancer, diagnosed late. Maren mentioned it once during her first week on the job, in the way you do when the grief is still shaping everything, but you're trying to keep it out of your work. She has a photograph taped inside her locker in the crew quarters. A woman with Maren's same wide face, same dark eyes, standing in front of a crab boil pot, laughing. If Maren is on that ferry after midnight, and the passengers board, and Cedric is right that what you see depends on something I don't have a name for, then there is a version of this where Maren sees her mother walk onto the vehicle deck of the Delmont, ride the 7-minute crossing in silence, and walk off into the dark in Edgard without looking at her. Or there is a version where her mother does look at her. I don't know which would be worse. I don't know what it would do. I don't know what it did to Cedric. Not really, because Cedric is not a man who shows you what things do to him. But I have watched him come back to work the morning after a midnight crossing where he saw someone he loved. And I have seen the way he holds the mooring line a little longer than he needs to, and the way he looks out at the reserve landing in the daylight as if he's checking whether they're still there. I will not put Maren in that position. That's not her job. She's here to learn the wheelhouse. She's here to get her certification. She's here to build a career and live a normal life on the water. And whatever the Delmond is doing after midnight is not part of that training, and it is not going to become part of it while I'm her captain. But here's what's happening now, and it's the reason I'm telling you this. 2 weeks ago, Maren stayed late to finish some paperwork in the crew quarters. I didn't know she was still aboard. Cedric and I were in the parking lot, and I had already locked the wheelhouse when I saw her light on through the porthole. I went back to get her. I told her the paperwork could wait. She looked at me with the expression she gets when she knows I'm managing her and doesn't appreciate it. She said she'd be done in 10 minutes. I said I needed her off the boat now. She left, but she wasn't happy about it. The engine started 40 minutes later. Last week, she asked me directly why she's never been scheduled for a night shift when Cedric has. She pointed out that her training plan includes overnight operations. She said she'd talked to someone at the parish office and they told her there was no policy restricting trainees from overnight shifts. She was right, there isn't. I told her the night shifts were limited and Cedric had seniority. She accepted that, but she didn't believe it. I could see her not believing it, the way you can see a person take a step they don't intend to take back. Yesterday, she asked Cedric. She asked him while I was in the wheelhouse, and she thought I couldn't hear, but the intercom was on. She said, "What happens on the boat at night that he doesn't want me to see?" Cedric said nothing for what felt like a full minute. Then he said, "You should ask the captain. She will ask me. Probably today. Probably this afternoon when the last scheduled crossing is done and the light is getting flat over the water and the commuters are driving off and there's nothing left between us but the question. And I don't know what to tell her. I can lie. I've been lying. I can keep lying, and she will eventually stop trusting me, and she will lose the best training post she's going to get, and she'll leave, and she'll be safe from it. That's one option. I drive her out by being a captain she can't respect, and she never has to stand on that vehicle deck at 2 a.m. and look at who walks on. Or I can tell her the truth. I can say, "Maren, the ferry runs after midnight and the dead ride it across the bayou, and I don't know why, and I don't know where they're going, and I don't know what it means that Cedric sees his own dead and I see strangers, and I am afraid of what you'll see." And then she'll make her own choice. She might stay. She might ask to be on the next midnight run. She's that kind of person. She forced her way into this job. She fought the parish for the trainee slot. And she's not someone who looks away from things. That's why she's good. That's exactly why she's good. And it is exactly why I am afraid for her. The Delmond is docked right now. It's 3:47 in the afternoon. The last crossing of the day is in 7 hours. Cedric is on the vehicle deck, hosing down the ramp, the way he always does. Maren is in the crew quarters, and I can see through the porthole that she's not doing paperwork. She's sitting, she's waiting. The engines are off, the water is calm. Reserve is half a mile away across the bayou, and in the daylight, the landing over there is empty, just concrete and bollards, and a tin-roofed shelter with a bench inside it. Tonight, it might stay that way, or the phone might ring, or the phone might not ring, and the engines might start on their own anyway. the way they've started doing more often lately, as if the Delmont has gotten tired of asking permission. Marin is going to walk up to the wheelhouse in a few minutes. I can feel it the same way I feel the night crossings coming. Not in my body, but in the structure of the day, in the way events are leaning. She's going to ask me what I've been keeping from her. She's going to stand in the doorway with the afternoon light behind her, and she's going to wait for me to say something true. I don't know yet what I'm going to say, but the ferry runs tonight, whether I know or not. The ferry has been running since before I was here. It will run after I'm gone. The passengers board on reserve, and they disembark on Edgard, and they walk up the road into a town full of living people who are sleeping in their houses. And by morning, there is no sign they were ever there. They don't need me to understand them. They don't need me to approve the crossing. They just need someone to run the boat. That's what I am. I'm the man who runs the boat. And in about 10 minutes, I'm going to find out whether that's all I am, or whether I'm also the man who decides what a 23-year-old woman gets to know about the world she's already living in, the water she's already working on, the vessel she's already learning to captain. The wheelhouse door is open. The afternoon is warm. I can hear her footsteps on the stairs.